Hearing come to order. Today's hearing is on the budget of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. We have before us Stephen Burns, the chairman of the commission, and his fellow commissioners Kristine Svinicki, William Ostendorff, and Jeff Baran. Thank you for all being here today, and we look forward to your testimony. Our government should not make policy based on energy sources that the market favors at any given time. It is our job to address our energy needs strategically and to work to create an environment where all forms of energy can compete. A robust energy portfolio is the best path to a secure energy future. I believe that nuclear energy is a critical component of that portfolio. The Commission plays an important role in ensuring nuclear energy's success. Nuclear energy must continue its strong safety record, but regulations need to ensure safety without placing undue burdens on the industry. We must move forward on long-term waste storage, and the Commission must be prepared to advance new and innovative nuclear technologies. I look forward to your thoughts on all of these subjects and many more. And I would also ask that witnesses to please ensure that for the hearing record, questions for the record, and any supporting information requested by the subcommittee be delivered in its final form to us no later than 4 weeks from the time you receive them. Members who have additional questions for the record will have until close of business tomorrow to provide them to the subcommittee office. With that, I'll turn to my ranking member, Ms. Kaptur, for her opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. Thank you, Chairman Burns and Commissioners Baran and Svinicki and Ostendorff. Thank you so very much for being here today and for the important work that you do for our country. Nuclear energy is a critical component of our nation's all-of-the-above energy strategy, and I think we're united as a committee on that. To meet this need, we currently rely on an aging fleet of nuclear power generation facilities with an average age of 34 years. Many have already outlived their initial 40-year licenses, and with others quickly approaching it. We know also that safety is paramount. 1 in 3 Americans live within 50 miles of a nuclear power plant. So you have serious work in your portfolios. As a member who represents one such facility, the Davis-Besse Nuclear Power Plant in Oak Harbor, Ohio, our region is keenly aware of the need to strike a balance between the jobs and economic opportunity these facilities support in the surrounding region, but we need to ensure the highest level of oversight and security to protect local people and communities. Unfortunately, our region has experienced 3 incidents and with the potential for great calamity if oversight and regulation is not handled properly. And design flaws and in the past lax oversight brought our region within 3/4 of an inch from disaster. I'm interested in hearing more about your plans for relicensing and continuing operations at these facilities while maintaining the utmost attention to safety. The NRC faces additional security concerns in addressing spent fuel storage and eventual disposal. The current approach is far from ideal. I think we can all agree on that. In the absence of real forward motion on Yucca Mountain or another site, our nation has no long-term solution to this pressing challenge. More than $10 billion has been spent on Yucca, yet America has nothing to show for that investment. The government has to live up to its responsibility to provide for the eventual safe disposal of commercial spent fuel that is currently stored at these sites, and I look forward to your thoughts on how we can meet this obligation. And as we discussed in the past, I have a particular interest in the training of personnel who work in nuclear power facilities, and would be very grateful for additional insight you could provide us on how we make sure that is done in the most excellent way for the current generation and the next. Thank you so very much, Mr. Chairman, and we look forward to your testimony.
Thank you. Mr. Burns.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman Simpson and Ranking Member Kaptur. My colleagues and I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss the NRC's fiscal year 2016 budget request. NRC, as you know, is an independent federal agency established to license and regulate the nation's civilian use of radioactive material and nuclear facilities to ensure adequate protection of the public health and safety, to promote the common defense and security, and to protect the environment. The resources that we are requesting for fiscal 2016 will allow the NRC to continue to ensure the safe and secure use of material and facilities in the United States. In addition to the agency's routine regulatory and oversight activities, the fiscal 2016 budget is expected to include, will cover continuing work in the licensing and construction of new reactors, the continued implementation of lessons learned from the accident at the Fukushima Daiichi power plant in Japan in 2011, and preparation for licensing of small reactors. The NRC readily acknowledges that it is in a changing environment. Since 2001, the agency grew significantly to enhance security and incident response and to prepare for the projected growth in the use of nuclear power in the U.S. That forecasting growth has been adjusted downward in response to changes in the nuclear industry. And as is appropriate, we are being scrutinized by our stakeholders and the Congress for our responsible use of resources. The Congress has charged the NRC with a critical mission to ensure public health and safety and the common defense and security. And we can never lose sight of that mission. Still, we can and should maintain our focus on that mission while also taking a responsible and hard look at whether we are effectively using our resources. Our fiscal 2016 budget reflects the NRC's efforts to demonstrate its responsiveness to the current environment in which we find ourselves. Continuing with trends that began in 2014, the 2016 budget request reflects a reduction in both dollars and staff from budget proposals in recent years, but it will still provide for the necessary resources, in our view, to carry out our mission. As required by law, the fiscal 2016 budget request provides for 90% fee recovery, less the amounts appropriated for certain specific activities. As such, approximately $910 million of the fiscal 2016 budget request will be recovered from fees assessed against NRC licensees. Our proposed fee rule for the current fiscal year 2015, which was published for public comment yesterday on March 23rd, includes estimates for reductions in the overall licensee annual and hourly fees. Another key step the NRC has taken to prepare for changes in its environment is Project AIM 2020. The project was initiated in June 2014 to enhance our ability to plan and execute our mission while adapting in a timely and effective manner to our dynamic environment. After gathering perspectives from internal and external stakeholders to forecast future workload in the operating environment in 2020, the staff recommended to the Commission a number of measures designed to transform the agency over the next 5 years to improve our effectiveness, our efficiency, and our agility. The staff's report was provided to the Commission on January 30th of this year, and the Commission considers this to be an important part of the dialogue about the future of the NRC. We want to be timely in acting on the report, but we also want to do so deliberately and smartly. And although the NRC recognizes the need for adaptation and change, we're also keenly aware that any major organizational change, if not done wisely, can have a detrimental effect on our mission and on the morale of our employees. We have a critical mission and some of the most dedicated and knowledgeable employees in the federal government. One final initiative I would mention is the Commission's focus over the past few years on its rulemaking process in order to understand and, if possible, reduce the cumulative effects of regulation. We're continuing to engage our stakeholders on this issue and will receive further recommendations from our staff for additional improvements this spring. In sum, we're cognizant of our changing environment and we're committing to taking a hard look at ourselves in order to ensure that we are prepared for the future. This concludes my formal testimony on the fiscal 2016 budget request. Again, on behalf of the Commission, I thank you for the opportunity to appear before you, and I look forward to working with you to advance our important safety and security mission. And I'm pleased to answer any questions you have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do any commissioners have opening statements you'd like to make? Ms. Svinicki?
Thank you, Chairman Simpson and Ranking Member Kaptur, for the opportunity to appear before you today. The Commission's Chairman, Stephen Burns, in his statement on behalf of the Commission, has provided an overview of the agency's budget request, as well as a description of some key agency accomplishments and challenges in carrying out the NRC's important work. The NRC continues to implement safety-significant lessons learned from the Fukushima accident in accordance with established agency processes and procedures, while also maintaining our focus on ensuring the safe operation of nuclear facilities and the safe use of nuclear materials across the country. The current period of implementation of Fukushima-related regulatory actions, which is a set of complex interrelated actions lasting several years, will require discipline and focus from the NRC staff as they review and process an extremely high volume of regulatory submittals and inspect the implementation of these requirements at licensee sites. At the same time, the agency will be carrying out a set of complex rulemaking activities related to Fukushima actions. In short, very demanding work continues before us. Concurrent with this, the NRC is undertaking a comprehensive initiative to improve agency budget formulation, budget implementation, and program execution. In other words, an effort to sharpen our delivery of the basics. This is truly a homegrown initiative involving the efforts and feedback of many hundreds of individual NRC employees who have demonstrated strong ownership of its core elements. These elements are right-sizing the agency, streamlining agency processes to use resources more wisely, improving timeliness in regulatory decision-making, and promoting a more unified agency purpose through agency-wide priority setting. We look forward to reflecting progress on these fronts in future budget submittals to you. I appreciate the opportunity to appear today and look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Mr. Ostendorff?
Good morning, Chairman Simpson and Ranking Member Capter. The Chairman has already provided an overview of the NRC's budget, the changing environment, and steps we are taking to improve the operations of the NRC through Project AIM. I'm in complete alignment with this testimony. I do want to expand just a bit upon the status of post-Fukushima safety enhancements. Along with Commissioner Svinicki, I've been involved in all the Commission's decision-making related to what safety changes we should require as a result of the operating experience from the tragic earthquake and tsunami in Japan 4 years ago. Looking back over the actions NRC has taken over these past 4 years as a result of Fukushima lessons learned, I firmly believe that the agency has acted on a foundational basis of science and engineering. We've appropriately given highest priority to the Tier 1 items associated with greatest safety significance. I'll not go into any details, but will make 2 very brief comments. First, as a career nuclear submarine officer, I spent 16 out of my 26 years in the Navy operating submarine reactor plants. I am confident, based on that experience, in NRC's safety actions post-Fukushima. And second, as I compare our safety actions to that of the broader international community, I am convinced that the NRC and the United States industry continue to be world leaders in nuclear safety. I had a chance just last week to visit the industry's regional response center in Phoenix. I believe Commissioner Svinicki was there with Commissioner Fuketa from the Japanese agency just the week before. I think those steps we have seen in the industry and the regulatory body have been significant, but perhaps not widely published. In closing, I appreciate the chance to be here today, and I look forward to your questions.
Chairman Simpson, Ranking Member Capter, thank you for the opportunity to appear today before the subcommittee. It's a pleasure to be here with my colleagues to discuss NRC's fiscal year 2016 budget request and the work of the Commission. First and foremost, NRC is focused on our mission of protecting public health and safety. Yet the agency faces a different environment than what was expected just a few years ago when substantial new reactor construction was anticipated and no licensees had yet announced plans to shut down any reactors. To meet our responsibilities now and in the future, we need to enhance the efficiency, effectiveness, and agility of the agency. In order to avoid disrupting the agency's work, I think it's important to set a thoughtful trajectory to the appropriate resource and staffing levels over the next few years. We need to make sure that we do a good job matching resources to expected workload. Before I joined the Commission, my colleagues had the foresight to initiate Project AIM, an internal working group tasked with looking at the changes NRC should make to prepare for the future. This is a valuable and timely effort. We're actively deliberating on the recommendations of the Project AIM team, and I expect that the Commission will approve some prudent actions in the near term. While we work to increase the agency's efficiency and agility, we need to ensure that NRC also maintains its focus on its ongoing safety work. Currently, 5 new reactors are being built in the U.S., and 5 reactors recently ceased operations and are entering decommissioning. At the construction sites, NRC is conducting oversight to ensure that the new plants are built safely and in accordance with regulatory requirements. For the decommissioning plants, the agency reviews requests for exemptions from some of the requirements that apply to operating plants. Meanwhile, the NRC staff is beginning a rulemaking to take a fresh look at a number of decommissioning issues. NRC is continuing to address post-Fukushima safety enhancements and lessons learned, as my colleagues indicated. Progress has been made in several areas, but we recognize that more work remains to be done. NRC also is responsible for having an efficient and effective licensing process for new designs and facilities. While NRC continues its work on pending applications for new reactors, we need to be ready to accept and review applications submitted for new technologies. We are expecting to receive the first application for a small modular reactor design next year in 2016. NRC already is reviewing an application for a new production facility for medical isotopes and anticipates additional applications of this type in the future. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you all, and first let me say I appreciate the work that you all do. This is both a challenging and a very important job for the future of this country and for nuclear safety, and I do appreciate the hard work that all of you do. All of you, I think, all of you, or almost all of you, mentioned in your statements Fukushima and the lessons learned there, and trying to increase the safety in our reactors and so forth, in our safety plans. We all talk about lessons learned. Can you give me some examples of what have we learned from Fukushima?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. I think one of the things that we learned was it actually built on a lesson I think we learned in terms of thinking about response after the 9/11 attacks, and that is having the availability of supplemental equipment that could be used to provide additional power or to assure essential systems were operational or could be put back in operation post an event, which is, if you look at the Fukushima accident, the inability, particularly in the units 1 through 4, to restore the electric diesel generator. That was one of the primary problems that led to additional problems. One of the things that we've done, and as Commissioner Ostendorff mentioned, is reflected in these regional support centers, but also on-site centers at each of the facilities, is the basically stockpiling of this additional equipment, pumps and valves, things like that might be needed in the event of a severe event. So I would say perhaps that's the most significant lesson that we've learned in terms of making that availability of equipment to cope with those unusual and rare events. Being able to do that's probably, I would say, the most important lesson. My colleagues might have something else to say.
Kristine?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for that question. Commissioner Ostendorff, in his statement just now, which I had not heard until just now, made an important point, which is that if you look across the international nuclear community, you see tremendous coherency in terms of the set of near-term actions that we all are calling our lessons learned from Fukushima. And at bottom, it's really no more complicated than this. Witnessing and experiencing something like the Fukushima accident, I think, challenged all countries with mature nuclear programs or those who are considering nuclear to really confront their assumptions about high consequence, low probability natural events. And so when Chairman Burns talks about further enhancing the set of equipment on site to mitigate in these low probability, high consequence events, as Commissioner Ostendorff pointed out, you see across nations that was the immediate first step. Now, countries can also overreact. I'm proud of the United States having, from very early days after the accident, President Obama stood outside the White House with our chairman at the time, Chairman Yatsko, and he asked for assurances for NRC to give assurance to the nation that nuclear power plants were safe. We did not shut all our plants down as Japan did. We did a quick look, and as the safety regulator, we were able to tell the American people it was safe to continue operating plants, but that didn't mean that there weren't opportunities for enhancement. As we've prioritized those are under implementation and have been for some time. So I think at bottom, that's the core lesson learned.
I'd like to chime in just to, I agree with everything that Chairman Burns and Commissioner Svinicki said. But one thing that, and Commissioner Svinicki and I went through this in great detail 4 years ago, I think one of the most significant steps decision-making wise the NRC as a body went through was to look at the near-term task force, which our staff in a short 90-day period presented to the Commission in July of 2011. And it had 12 recommendations with different subparts to that. And this is a very thoughtful body of work, but two comments I'd make, Chairman, in response to that report. One, our level of knowledge has significantly increased over the last 4 years as we've gotten into the details, working in very collaborative engagement with industry to figure out what really makes sense here, where do we add value. And the second piece I'd say is we've been very thoughtful in saying we can't do all this at one time, nor should we try to. Let's take those high priority action items, and sometimes it's taken a little bit longer than we thought it would, but we believe it's been important to get it done right the first time rather than get it done fast. So I'd just add those comments.
Is industry in agreement with that?
I believe so.
Jeff?
I think my colleagues have done a really good job covering this, but the only thing I would add, I think one of the important lessons learned that really the near-term task force detected right away when they worked in the immediate aftermath of Fukushima is really the cliff edge effects of flooding, which I don't know that was fully appreciated. So, you know, the plants there obviously, or not obviously, but did pretty well in terms of the seismic event, the earthquake itself. But the flooding is what really knocked out the power and the ability to provide core cooling that was so essential. And so I think one of the focuses that the NRC has had over the years before I arrived, obviously, was the work on flooding, the focus on flooding. There were walk-downs immediately after the event to check the status of defenses against flooding. And then there's been an effort ongoing to reevaluate the flooding hazards to make sure that, you know, in the decades that have passed since some of these plants were licensed, we make sure we really understand what are the potential flooding hazards in our plants, prepared to mitigate it with new equipment or to protect against it with any modifications that might be necessary. So I think that's a key lesson learned that has been responded to significantly in what the NRC's done in the past few years.
Thank you. It's my understanding, now into some questions that we all agree with, the subject matter is non-controversial, everybody in Washington kind of is on the same page here. It's my understanding that the Commission will work to develop and issue a supplemental environmental impact statement for Yucca Mountain, that non-controversial subject, this year because the Department of Energy will not. Can you lay out for us the schedule to complete the EIS supplemental? And as you do so, could you please highlight for us what responsibilities and activities the Commission will have to take on as a result of the Department of Energy's decision to only provide an update to the 2009 technical report? And can you please tell us how much the Commission will need to spend in 2015 to address EIS supplemental activities that the Department of Energy completed during the previous EIS process, and do you have sufficient funds to complete the supplemental?
The basic schedule, Mr. Chairman, is about 12 to 15 months. So it would be perhaps about this time next year we would issue this supplemental statement. We do have the funding with the, you may have mentioned it, if not, but there's approximately $4 million left in the carryover funds the agency has. That would be sufficient to cover doing the supplemental EIS, as well as there's some other activities related, primarily the archiving some of the documents, assuring the documentation on the overall, that we have on the overall application and review process are preserved appropriately. We've been preserving them, but there's some other the steps, and we can provide the details if you like. But that's essentially what we would do with that, and I'm not sure whether I've answered all in the set of your questions, but I'm happy to try to supplement. Okay.
That pretty much covers it. I've suggested in the past that we not, as this debate on Yucca Mountain went forward, that we not do anything to ruin that cave, because we're going to need a cave that size to store all the study papers that have been done on Yucca Mountain. It's probably the most studied piece of earth on Earth. The report, in a report provided to the committee in August 2014, the cost for the commission to complete all the activities required to authorize construction at Yucca Mountain was estimated at $330 million. What could the commission accomplish towards moving the Yucca construction license forward in 2016, and how much would you need to do that if you assume a willing, responsive applicant? And what would you need for the Department of Energy to do in 2016 to support those activities?
Well, as I say, the overall, the approximate $330 million would be for activities with respect to the NRC's completion of its role. That primary things that, beyond this step where I talked about completion of the EIS, then we have the adjudicatory hearing, which is provided for by law. There's some close to 300 contentions in front of our licensing board. So that much of it would go to that, and then I think there are probably some supplemental staff activities if you got through the hearing process, and then and assuming a favorable decision, and you would have some staff activities you would do that. My understanding is that I think somewhere in the order to $25 to $30 million might be the amount that agency activities reflecting a resumption of the adjudication for the fiscal year 2016 period. Again, I think if you have from my perspective, a willing applicant, because again, the significant step you are now in is an adjudication where you, in normal terms, you expect an advocate for the application, like we would in other types of licensing proceedings. Again, because the NRC's role is as the licensing authority and the oversight oversight of the application process.
I showed you a coin that I had in my office the other day.
Yes,
that
you
was
did.
from 2009. It was a nice coin that they minted. It was to commemorate the application of the license for Yucca Mountain. I think that's going to be a historical coin at some point in time. It's my understanding that Waste Control Specialists, a private company that provides waste treatment, storage, and disposal, has announced their intent to apply for a license for the interim storage of used nuclear fuel by April 2016. In developing the fiscal year 2016 budget request, did you estimate the resources that would be needed to process this license, and were they included in this budget request?
I believe that they are not in the request.
Can you
That's
please
my
discuss what activities were included in the budget for nuclear materials and waste safety, and if the Congress does not include more than requested, can you tell me if the requested activities will have priority over license applications that were not proposed as part of this request? In other words, over WCS.
Yeah. Whether the activities would be that are in that part of our budget would reflect other ongoing activities with respect to licensing related to materials, oversight of existing fuel facilities and the like that are within that portion of the budget. I might need to get it back to you unless one of my colleagues may want to say it.
If my memory is correct, the Waste Control Specialist alert to us or notification came a bit late in our budget formulation process. So we did not, it wasn't because of any intentional decision, but just because of that timing, we did not include funds explicitly for review or starting the review of such a storage facility application. I should mention that we have a well-established regulatory framework for a spent fuel storage installation. It's 10 Code of Federal Regulations, Part 72. So this, we do not need to come up with a new framework for reviewing such as this. And commensurate with that, we would anticipate, or our staff informs us, that resource requirements in the first year would not be significant. I think if funds were not appropriated specifically to support the review, our staff has informed the Commission that it would likely be possible to reallocate amongst funds. It's one of our larger budget lines, so we should be able, I can't make a commitment that it would take priority over other work. We would have to look at that, but we do think it could likely be accommodated.
I'll just add that the estimate we received from our staff, Chairman Simpson, on this was about $3 million if the application is full and complete and detailed enough. And we've had some experience as an agency dealing with a similar application back in the 1990s with private fuel storage, a facility of a similar nature that was proposed for the state of Utah.
Just briefly to, excuse me, build off Commissioner Ostendorff's remarks, what the staff was telling us was that $3 million was what it would probably cost for the safety and security review. You'd also have to do an environmental impact statement, which would be about $2 million. So, and their expectation is that process, the review process, would take about 3 years, assuming no contentions were filed. In other words, 3 years without the adjudicatory step. So $5 million over a 3-year period is their estimate right now, without actually, of course, seeing the application.
I've had people come to me and talk to me about deep borehole storage. Have you guys done anything on that? Is that, what would they need a license? Obviously, they'd need a license. Is that a reality? I heard it mentioned just yesterday, as a matter of fact.
As far as I know, as an agency, we have not done anything with respect to the deep borehole storage. If, as you say, if it's an entity that we would have the responsibility to license, we would prepare to do what we need to do in terms of the technical criteria and reviewing it. But to date, as I understand, we have not.
Yeah. Interesting idea.
I'd just like to distinguish that where deep borehole is discussed, it is typically a disposal option, not a storage option. So just making that distinguishable case. And,
but it would still need licensing.
Yes, it would. And I believe that DOE's Blue Ribbon Commission spoke to this technology option for disposal as something that was promising, but as the regulator, we've not conducted any work on it.
Okay. I don't know how this, and I just say this for whoever's listening, I don't know how this is going to work out in our budget and stuff. The House obviously believes that Yucca Mountain is the law of the land, and we need to be following the laws that exist, and we need to proceed down that line. The Senate has a provision that they've tried to implement relative to interim storage, and they put that in their bill, and so far we've knocked them both out when we get into conference because, as Senator Feinstein and I discussed, it's not one or the other, it's both as far as the House is concerned if you're going to do those. And so I don't know how it's going to work out with the Senate this year. We all know that if Yucca Mountain were to open tomorrow, that we would need additional storage beyond that capacity anyway. So I've been supportive of moving forward with the pilot program and of moving forward with Yucca Mountain, but as I said, that's kind of out of the technical area and into the politics area. So, Marcy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Burns, 14 commercial nuclear reactors will go through relicensing over the next 10 years, and some of these are facing a checkered past of safety concerns. What assurances can you share that due diligence is being taken in the relicensing process and that there will be an emphasis on continued safe operations?
Well, safety is at the heart of everything we do, and the touchstone for our requirements, whether we're conducting inspections and oversight or undertaking our licensing responsibilities. The Commission's renewal process has been well established. There are about 75 units that have gone through the license renewal process already. License renewal focuses primarily on the aging effects and assuring that those are managed in the renewal term. We have, beyond just the license renewal, we have ongoing oversight particularly over the last 15 years or so, and partly from lessons learned from our own experience and looking at ourselves as well as the performance of licensees. We developed what's called the Reactor oversight process. That is intended to look at the various areas of not only operation but radiation safety and other types of performance, and from our inspection program assess the performance of licensees. So that is what I would call the primary focus in terms of integrating performance, assessing performance, and assuring that there's adequate oversight based on the results of inspections and reports of events and things like that at power plants.
If you were to compare the variety of designs in the plants that you will be evaluating for relicensing, compared to a nation like France, for example, how many different designs do we have in this country compared to others? And are you thinking about streamlining the number of plants that are out there in order to have more symmetry between what it is we are regulating?
Well, I would say that I'm not sure I know a particular number. There have been several major vendors within the United States that constructed or provided the design for power plants. For example, Westinghouse, General Electric Corporation, formerly Combustion Engineering Corporation, and and Babcock and Wilcox. So there are, there's those basic designs, and there may have been variations in terms as they developed. Within France, again, I won't say that there's a single design or one design, but basically my understanding is that the French, having obtained the Westinghouse technology, then basically adapted it. They have, in effect, a homegrown facility, and essentially have used that design at most of the French installations. What we did in the United States is, and I think this was one of the lessons learned actually coming out of the 3 Mile Island accident, was in looking at enhancing standardization. And one of the things that we did in terms of adopting the licensing process we're using now for new reactors is focusing on design certifications that then can be applied at different individual applications. And we have gone through in terms of certifying a number of designs, a Westinghouse design, a General Electric design, for example. So that's, as I say, there were policies, particularly in the 80s and on into the 90s, in terms of enhancing that standardization, which I think has benefits to the industry, but it does have benefits in terms, I think, for us in terms of our oversight and inspection.
Does anyone else wish to comment? Because we have about 100 plants operating in the country. I guess with relicensing, the question is, can there be more standardization, or is that an impossibility? Yes, I think both the Commissioner Svinicki and Ostendorff wish to comment, and I thank you both.
Thank you. Speaking to your question about what assurance can the NRC give in terms of the safety of aging plants, I think a key assurance that NRC gives is that any emerging issue will not await a relicensing review, and Chairman Burns spoke to this a bit in his response. Many of the issues that have been encountered, concrete aging in the, for oceanside plants in the northeastern United States, the material corrosion of the vessel head at Davis-Besse, these things do not await any review. The agency takes regulatory action immediately. So I would hope that would be an assurance to the public that we don't store up these issues and wait for any kind of relicensing or license renewal process. I would draw a key distinction between France and the United States, and it is that France has, in essence, one operator, Électricité de France, and therefore there is greater coherency and consistency among the program they've implemented across their country. And while some speak to a more homogenized power reactor fleet that France has as an advantage, and I'm sure it does pose advantages, in the same way that the all-of-the-above energy policy is intended to provide strength through diversity of supply, having diverse designs in the United States is viewed by many as a strength of the U.S. system if there should be some emergent, unpredicted phenomenon or aging management issue that would arise. If you have a diversity of plants, you have a greater likelihood that it will not be problematic at all of them. and essentially it would not be emerging all at the same time. So there's two ways of looking at whether or not there's strength and resiliency in having the same plant built over and over again. That's just a perspective that
Of
some have.
100 plants in our country, how many, if you could classify them by design, how many different designs do we have?
Well,
I know it's not 100.
Yeah, it isn't 100 designs, but what's interesting is because there are site-specific adaptations and then there was knowledge gained over time evolving and improving the designs, candidly, the answer many give is that there are 100 different plants, and that's the complexity of NRC's regulatory challenge, is that even if the same design has been built, it has probably been modified for each location. Now, the significance of those adaptations and modifications varies, but there is, I think if the French regulators come here, they see a rather dazzling diversity in our fleet compared to their own.
You know, the auto industry had to streamline and had to reduce the number of models, and it's still about the task of doing that. And when you have a lot of permutations and combinations, forgetting just that they're nuclear power plants, just mathematically, you have more chances for error. Now, where that balance, I don't know. I'm just saying that I think it's something to really think about in the relicensing process. And looking forward, how we use whatever power we have to streamline and to limit the possibility for error and for mechanical failure and different things that happen inside these plants. I think Commissioner Ostendorff wanted to make a comment.
Thank you. I
as
wanted
well.
to maybe just piggyback on both the chairman and Commissioner Svinicki's comments. I want to talk about just very quickly one program we have that I think gets to part of your concern. That's called the Component Design Basis Inspection Program. It's for our existing operating nuclear power plants. Every 3 years, each of the nuclear power plants in the United States undergoes a 5-week inspection. That inspection is to look at, is the pump that's supposed to pump water pumping at the hundreds of gallons or thousands of gallons per minute it's designed to? Is electrical distribution system functioning as it's designed to? So on top of some of the aging management concerns that have been alluded to by my colleagues, there's a very deep dive inspection done every 3 years at each power plant, looking at a focused area to ensure that we have a good understanding of the basic engineering operation and is that plant operating as designed. So I think to a certain extent one of your concerns, Congresswoman, is how do we know these plants are safe with various designs?
Right.
That's one component we think is very important to our regulatory approach. The second piece, and this is relating to Commissioner Svinicki's comments, I would say that, yes, there's a number of different designs in the United States. At a high level, we have pressurized water reactors and boiling water reactors. So two fundamental types of designs, but they're all water cooled. We're not talking about, for our commercial power reactors, we don't have molten salt or the high temperature gas reactors, some other experimental designs. So they are in two fundamental families. But what we've seen over decades is that as industry and the NRC have worked together to ensure that equipment upgrades are accomplished at these different design plants, we're seeing a convergence on some systems. I'll use one example. Many of our systems have gone from analog to digital control systems for feed water control. So you'll see a lot of commonality in digital feed water control installations at various nuclear power plants. Just as one example how there is a lot of commonality in upgrade features based on lessons learned and operating experience.
I thank you for that. Commissioner Baran, did you want to add something here? You're shaking your head there.
Sure. Yeah, no, I agree with everything my colleagues have said. The only other thing I would mention is just as part of the response to Fukushima, one of the requirements was that there be equipment on site and also in regional response centers to deal with situations where there was a loss of power at a plant. And one of the things I've mentioned in terms of standardization is all that equipment, all the connections for that equipment are standard across the country. So the generators, the pumps, those types of equipment. If there was anything that happened beyond design basis event at a plant, an emergency situation, there's equipment that's going to be on site at that plant to deal with that in terms of mitigation, but you could take equipment from any other plant in the country or from the regional response centers, and it would all fit and work at every plant. And so that is a key kind of standardization development that I think is directly relevant to safety.
Chairman Burns, you happened to mention in one meeting that we had about the different ways in which equipment was colored for connections. Do you want to restate that for the record here in trying to standardize for ease of operation?
Yes, one of what I discussed with you, I had recently visited the North Anna plant, which is south of Washington between Fredericksburg and Richmond. And North Anna, Dominion Power that operates North Anna was one of the lead plants in terms of doing this, what we call the flex equipment, this additional equipment to respond to the beyond design basis accidents. And what they did is a lot of the things that you would expect connections to, cabling or some sort of piping, they would be pumps and things like this. They would have, in effect, color-coded. Color-coded so the equipment that you would bring in when you look into the plant, that it helps you recognize where you need to make the connections up. And I think that's a very good, very smart way of doing things in terms of helping the people who are there, who are under duress because you've got this event going on. They want to make sure the plant is safe. I think it helps them in terms of getting the right things done.
I hope that as you proceed in the relicensing process, that these kinds of good practices, best practices, are shared industry-wide. I'm sure you're doing that, but I just want to encourage it in any way that I can, having lived through 3 different incidents in the region that I represent. Anything we can do to streamline, anything we can do to promote safety as this relicensing occurs, I think is a very good step. In that regard, in your testimonies and comments here this morning, the one word I haven't seen is workforce development and training, and that's of concern to me. As you conduct your affairs, what can you tell us about how the NRC engages and provides oversight for the training of nuclear power plant personnel, not just the in-plant operators, but the contract and the critical skills that most often are hired through these contracted relationships. I'm talking particularly about plumbers and pipe fitters, electricians, boilermakers, who are called in at different points, but they might not be full-time employees of that company. What can NRC do to recognize, engage, elevate the vital importance of these skilled tradespeople in the operation and repair of our nation's nuclear power endowment? Or do you just leave that to somebody else? Or do you think about that training aspect and the regularity of how workers are trained?
No, I think we do think about it, and it's reflected in the requirements that we expect licensees to meet in terms of conducting all their operations. And that's not only for, in fact, their personnel in terms of company personnel, but for contract workers. And I think as you and I were discussing, often on outages where you come and do refurbishment, you may often use a contract workforce. Often that these are folks sometimes who may go around the country, go other places. Part of the fundamentals go to, and it may not at first blush seem like it's about training, but I think at the core it is things like our quality assurance requirements that say that in order to conduct an activity in the plant, a safety-related activity or other activity important to safety, you need to understand what are the things you need to do. You have to have personnel who are equipped and trained and understand what it is, the environment they're going into, what it is they're expected to do. You may have a sheet that they need to sign off. So critical to that is understanding those requirements, and that's an expectation, and that's something in terms of our inspections that we audit, with respect to the conformance to those types of requirements. So at a sort of a general overview, I think maybe I'll leave my answer there, and then my colleagues might have something they'd like to add.
If I may, Congresswoman, to the extent your question went to looking to the future and preparing
Yes.
for the workforce of the future, maybe in the realm of encouraging, not so much compelling, but I have engaged with a number of nuclear power plant operators in the United States when I visit their plants. I engage them on the topic of local vocational and technical community colleges, and what I'm pleased to hear is that many of them have extensive cooperative programs with local vocational colleges. I was, as Commissioner Ostendorff notes, recently at the Palo Verde plant out in Arizona. Maricopa County has a community college program. The plant is almost exclusively hiring. They helped design the curriculum for that vocational program, and again, this is welders and maintenance craftspeople, tradespeople. They've worked with the community college to develop the curriculum, and as a result, they're hiring almost exclusively tradespeople that come out of that program because they know that they will arrive on site with the right training to the high-quality nuclear standards required. Same thing in Bay City, Texas, near the South Texas project. I actually visited the community college there and engaged with students that are either summer hires and hope eventually to work full-time in various trades roles at nuclear power plants. And I don't kid myself that this was all philanthropy. Frankly, these plants need to have access to a pipeline of workers for the future, and so in their own interests, if nothing else, they've engaged with local trade schools to make sure that they have a pipeline of people who will be ready to do the job on day one.
Well, first of all, I congratulate you for going to those institutions. And I would like to invite you to my region and to meet the people that 3 times prevented catastrophe in our region, and to take a look at the pipeline through which they came in order to do their job, and to consider how we can learn from the matrix of entities that are out there producing this talent. And I think we can do a better job of linkages between those places that are training with those who are doing this incredibly difficult work. I'll be there myself if you come.
Great. Thank you. I'll take
because
you
I
up on
think the
that.
NRC has something to learn and to appreciate from what is being done in places like I represent. But I just wanted to point out the absence of that whole focus on workforce and training in the testimony that was presented today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know there are others waiting.
Ms. Loy?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for coming late. As the chair knows, we have several hearings all scheduled at the same time today. So thank you for being here. My congressional district includes Indian Point, which houses 1 decommissioned, 2 nuclear power plants owned and operated by Entergy. Another company, Spectra, has proposed the Algonquin Incremental Market Expansion, which is called AIM project, which would expand a natural gas pipeline which transverses the Indian Point property. This is of great concern to me and to many of my constituents, and I strongly believe that the NRC has not adequately investigated the risks nor responded substantively to the concerns that have been raised. Why did the NRC rely on Entergy's hazards analysis instead of performing an independent analysis of risk and consequences of construction and operation of the AIM project? That's the first question.
Well, actually, Congresswoman, the NRC did review the energy analysis and did its own confirmatory analysis of the energy hazard analysis, which they're required to submit to us.
But it wasn't an independent analysis of risk and consequences of construction and operation, was it?
Well, it was an analysis by our staff. We are independent of the applicant or the licensee. So from that standpoint, I think we provided, or our staff did do an analysis and documented that analysis in an inspection report, I think end of last year, in November last year.
Is this typical procedure? Where you don't where you rely on the owner's analysis?
Well, we expect the owner, I think it is typical that we expect the licensee, who has ultimate responsibility, is responsible for safe operation on the site. We would expect the licensee to submit the analyses, and then we would review that and reach our conclusions whether it conformed to the analytical standards or the outcome. And from my understanding, that's what the staff did.
Mm-hmm. Now, did the NRC evaluate the impact of drilling fluids used in the horizontal directional drilling for AIM on the spent fuel rod pools located at Indian Point?
My understanding is that the horizontal directional drilling is planned for that portion of the pipeline that runs under the Hudson River. And the staff does not review or inspect how that drilling would be performed, particularly in the river. And that location is about a half mile or so away from the site, or the spent fuel pool buildings, as I understand it. The spent fuel pool buildings are seismically qualified, seismically designed, and the impact of drilling fluids would not have an impact, as we understand it, on those structures. Underground drilling with drilling fluids would have to be very close in proximity to the spent fuel pool buildings in the protected area for that to be of a safety concern to the agency.
Well, as I understand it, compared to AIM, there is a smaller pipeline with lower gas pressure near the Turkey Point nuclear power plant in Homestead, Florida. However, the NRC predicted a greater damage radius in Florida than it did for AIM at Indian Point. Can you explain why? It doesn't make any sense.
Well, at the Turkey Point, as I understand it, at the Turkey Point 6 and 7 application, the applicant evaluated the natural gas pipeline near the proposed units. The staff evaluated the potential effects in the same manner as that it did for the AIM project, and the resulting effects were lower Turkey Point due to the smaller size of the pipeline. What the applicant at Turkey Point did is it submitted an analysis that used a very conservative assumption on, I think, on the confined explosion, and a result in a larger calculated distance for a pressure, for the pressure release, or a pressure wave, than the NRC analysis. Again, I think that at the core here, the applicant decided to use a very conservative analysis. We thought using appropriate analyses, that was acceptable. If they wanted to use a more conservative analysis, they could. But in terms of the outcome, we believe that both the Turkey Point situation and the Indian Point situation were satisfactory.
Well, another question. I don't understand why the NRC used the Aloha Manual instead of the NRC Regulatory Guide 1.91 when it performed a sensitivity study and determined that a delayed closure of the pipeline's isolation valves after a rupture would result in only a minimal increase in overpressure and heat flux at safety-related structures, systems, and components of the plant. The Aloha model assumed an incident at the end of the pipeline. Why was a rupture in the middle of the pipeline not considered?
Okay. Again, from my understanding and speaking with the NRC staff, that the Aloha model calculates the release rate of gas based on the pipeline and its operating characteristics, and computes the resulting effects of a vapor cloud explosion, jet fire heat flux, and cloud fire based on flammable concentration limits. And since an instantaneous explosion of the pipe rupture is not considered realistic and not computed by the Aloha model, the calculated release of gas from using that model was used to determine the amount of gas available for an instantaneous explosion. Now, the evaluation of instantaneous explosion used in the regulatory guide, as opposed to the Aloha model, to compute, it's basically used to compute the TNT equivalent for determining the minimum safe distance where the overpressure would be predicted to occur.
Well, that's what's puzzling to me. Doesn't Regulatory Guide 1.91 have provisions for jet flame, cloud fire, and vapor cloud?
No, essentially, again, my understanding is that the Regulatory Guide 1.91 calculates minimum safe distance by evaluating potential explosion at the source based on an amount of explosive in terms of TNT, in terms of you have a certain amount of TNT at that particular point. And it uses that to evaluate for a potential explosion. There are not provisions in the Reg Guide for vapor cloud explosion or this heat flux, jet flame, or the cloud fire.
Why is that?
I would have to get my staff to explain that more. Again, I think the idea is the Reg Guide assumes there's an equivalent explosion to TNT, whatever the source of the explosion is. But we can certainly, for the record, provide you some more information or have the staff brief you or your staff on that issue.
Well, thank you for your comments. As you can see, I have many people, including myself, that have real concerns about the proximity. And I hope we can follow up and have an additional in-depth discussion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everyone. It's great to be with you all. My first question is, can you provide an update on the operating license approval process at Watts Bar Unit 2, please? And my follow-up question to that will be, when do you think we can expect to see the Unit 2 reactor generating electricity?
The TVA's proposed fuel load date, I think, is in about June this year. I expect to get a recommendation soon from our staff with respect to the licensing decision on Watts Bar 2, assuming assuming there are no issues identified. I think the nominal prediction is. Again, assuming they receive the license after the final commission review, is toward the end of the operation, toward the end of this year. There may be a couple other matters that the commission has to look at in terms of late contentions or something like that, but that's what I understand the schedule to be.
Okay, and then for when it's generating electricity, you think by the end of this year? Is that when
again, that will depend. That depends also on what the Tennessee Valley Authority's plans are. I think some of their announced plans talk about the end of this year or early next year.
Okay, thank you. I want to turn to a topic that's very important to me, and I know very important to this entire subcommittee: the small modular reactors. They provide an opportunity for clean, reliable energy, and this subcommittee has been strongly supportive of SMR development. I've got 4 questions. How many SMR licenses do you expect to begin reviewing in fiscal year 2016, and was that workload included in the budget request?
I believe we expect 1 application in 2016, and we did provide for that review in the budget.
Okay. Can the NRC provide an update of the licensing process for the NuScale small modular reactor design? And it's my understanding that you're currently working with them at the pre-application stage.
That's correct, and that's the application we expect in 2016.
Can you provide the committee with a timeline for the NRC to complete its review and approval for design certification for the NuScale SMR?
Yes, we can. If I could provide that for the record, because I don't have it in my head at this point.
Fair enough, and we'd ask you to do that. Does the NRC require additional funding to complete review of the design certification application for NuScale's SMR? What about other applications for advanced reactor design?
At this point, I don't believe that we require additional funding for that. We've tried to put in the 2016 budget what you know, our expectations are. Some of those expectations reflect a communication with industry in terms of their plans. The same way we have some work with respect to advanced or Generation 4 reactors that we have ongoing, and I believe at the current level of activity are covered within the budget request for 2016.
Okay, sir. Can you comment on creating a multinational design certification process for future Generation 3 reactors, such as SMRs and Generation 4 type reactors? Yes.
The United States participates, and the NRC is a participant in the Multinational Design Evaluation Program, which is basically, it's supported out of my former organization, the Nuclear Energy Agency at the OECD in Paris. It was founded, actually the U.S. and among other European regulators, the ones who founded that initiative, and it's a way of communicating with respect to approaches to design, learning from experience in the development and implementation of new designs. The step it has not gone so far as, and I think a step that is probably some time off, that there is not an absolute international harmonization over particular design standards. In other words, we aren't at the point of, say, the airline industry, whereas if you build the aircraft in the United States, it's recognized immediately in say France or Brazil or vice versa. I think we're some time off from that, but again, through this, the MDEP, the Multinational Design Evaluation Program, I think there are good steps toward harmonization, again, communication, and learning from experience, and we continue to support that.
Well, as a follow-up, and I thank you for your answer to that question, as a follow-up to that, what are your views of these multinational applications going through country certifications simultaneously rather than sequentially? And this would help to reduce costs and time to license new reactor designs. Is that correct, sir?
I'm going to make sure I understand your question. If they went through simultaneously
as opposed to sequentially?
Potentially, the reason I say potentially is because in some circumstances, and we've seen this, I think, in our country, where there has been great interest in terms of obtaining the U.S. design certification from the NRC, because then that is viewed as in effect, the good housekeeping seal that is then looked to by other countries in terms of their proceeding with implementation of those particular designs. Again, to the extent that there is harmonization, I can see potential benefits. But again, each country, the responsibility under, for example, the Convention on Nuclear Safety is that each country still needs to make its determination with respect to its regulatory regime, whether it meets its safety requirements. That said, I would agree that coming to greater harmonization, learning from the experience of others, not only in our own country, but from others, is a helpful thing.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you all. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Mr. Barnett?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me address an issue that is, I think, should be in the forefront of all of our minds. Where are we going in the 21st century with regard to nuclear technology, the proliferation not only of the intellectual assets to be able to derive power, but potential military applications? And then you talked about not yet a harmonization of design standards, but not yet a harmonization of non-proliferation efforts either. Some movement in that regard, but clearly of late with the tensions with Russia, a suspension of a lot of very good older programs that have helped secure loose materials. That's where I want to start, and the specific question would be, in your work, what do you see as the greatest threat to non-proliferation, both domestically as well as internationally?
I think from
Are these lines between commercial and military usage blurring?
well, I think you've always had the issues in terms of those.
Yeah, just
those
because we
lines.
create a line doesn't mean there is a line.
No, and I would draw on the experience in the United States, for example, it has supported the efforts of, say, the Nuclear Suppliers Group in terms of looking at dual-use technologies and assuring, getting high assurance that that technology is used appropriately in civilian applications.
Which has been very helpful, obviously,
Yes.
as an entity outside formal regulatory authority to regulating this dynamic.
Yes, but we also have, as I talked about, the NSG is essentially a, much like this multinational design evaluation program I spoke to, a cooperative effort of various states and various suppliers in the non-proliferation community, particularly through the IAEA. Within our own country, we have, again, requirements with respect to export controls and export reviews. We have responsibility in that area, as does the Department of Commerce and the Department of Energy. So those efforts, I think those are the efforts that are important on, in terms of a country-specific application and implementation.
Is it enough?
I think what we have today
Again,
meets.
what you've got going on is in the technology's out of the bottle, so to speak. The ability to do these things is widespread now, much more widespread, and will continue to grow. So that comes down to then control of materials, which hopefully will always be in the hands of nation states. In some places, nation states, the whole concept is under threat and is collapsing. So it creates, we ought to constantly be reevaluating our framework here, which is going back decades to an era where we decided that we're going to have atoms for peace. There's going to be peaceful nuclear usages. And there's going to be a military dimension in our country that's an important component of our own deterrence from the use of military weapons. Yet at the same time, again, lines of distinction aren't as neat as they used to be. And with enhanced capabilities through, the intellectual capabilities of doing this stuff, are we in front of that curve? We also have enhancements of, though, interconnectedness with other countries and the opportunity to harmonize efforts as never before. But are we in front of it?
I'm not sure that, I don't think I would say that we're behind it. I think this is something we've looked at, we learn from experience, we learn from the information we have, that we receive in terms of the nature of the threat that's out there. We have requirements, as we're obligated to do in the United States under our treaty obligations with respect to material accounting and control. Again, I think within our export our policies and in terms of our implementation, I think those are effective. I think, by the same token, I wouldn't disagree that greater awareness and thinking about the context in which we are internationally, particularly since I entered started out as a young lawyer in the late 1970s, we are certainly more interconnected with respect to civilian nuclear technology. Components come from all over the world. The commerce is all over the world.
And we have a robust, full, complete understanding of that inventory.
Of the inventory, I think we can have a complete understanding of, or at least a robust understanding inventory with respect to material within the United States. I think that's the objective, and that's what we go to.
And
do we know where every widget, component, etc. goes? Probably not.
And this begs the earlier point of what can we do better in this regard?
I would probably say we can always do better, But again, I think we have a regime that, in terms of looking at items that are, for example, dual-use items, items that are controlled for export, that addresses the threat and addresses the national interest. And I think a lot of what is probably what we can do is make sure that we're dedicated to implementing that and carrying through on it.
I can come back, Mr. Chairman, if time's up, or I can keep going. Either way. 1 minute. But back to this issue of inventorying material. Ultimately, again, a new architecture of non-proliferation, that if we're going to continue down the same pathway and ensuring that commercial uses aren't readily transferable to military uses, and if we're going to clean up messes and identify prior material that's been out there and that's loose, and then secure that going forward, doesn't it beg a construct that has all inventory counted everywhere?
It's good to know where everything is. And again, I think within this country, we have pretty high standards, and I think we do that. The issue, and I recognize this has been an issue certainly at the fall of the Soviet Union, and efforts that were undertaken both on a bilateral and a multilateral basis to address that, try to address those issues. But again, I think within our own country, I think we've done pretty well.
Yes. I add to this, I would observe, and I used to be the #2 official of the National Nuclear Security Administration, where all the DOE non-proliferation programs resided, and having watching this area for a number of years, from my time in the military, my time working for the House Armed Services Committee, and then the last 5 years in NRC, I would say that this commission has been heavily engaged with the White House, Department of State, Department of Energy, the intelligence community, to ensure that we have proper situational awareness of where the materials are outside of our country. I think with the advent of the non-Lugar programs in the 1990s, there is a lot of stuff that was found 20 years ago that surprised a lot of people. I think our awareness today in 2015 is infinitely better than where it was 20 years ago. We do not have authority as an agency to conduct our own assessments overseas, but we are fully plugged in with the interagency group, the intelligence community, to have the awareness, I think, that's of your concern.
Well, this is the key, because you're not going to be able to control the technology, the information technology, like we're able. But it is the flow of material that is the key if we're going to keep ourselves safe. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Valadeo?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you very much for coming out and spending some time with us as well. The NRC is proposing, bad habit. The NRC is proposing to amend its regulations related to the medical use of byproduct material. It has been suggested that the training requirements for physicians treating patients with therapeutic radiopharmaceuticals can vary widely depending on the drug. Is it currently the case, or is the NRC proposing a rule that would make this the case? And how does the NRC determine physician training requirements?
I'm sorry, Congressman. I may have to provide you for the record. I'm not sure of the status of, there was a rulemaking effort. I'm not sure exactly of the status of where it is now, but I'd be happy to provide you the full information on that.
Then I'll skip the next one on the same issue. The decommissioned sites. The U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission, NRC, held a public briefing on July 15, 2014 to give the Commission an overview of the nuclear power plant decommissioning process, status, and issues related to the 4 nuclear plants that recently entered decommissioning, including San Onofre nuclear plant in my home state. Chairman Burns, can you briefly describe the challenges of decommissioned plants and the public reaction, and do you expect additional plants to enter the decommissioning process in 2016?
To answer the last question first, is we do not expect additional plants in 2016. We have not been informed of that. Recognizing that there are some plants who may be, or some utilities may be evaluating because some of the economic challenges I think the chairman noted at the beginning. What we are doing now, we have successfully gone through the decommissioning process with a number of facilities. And as you note, more recently, we've had 5 facilities come into the decommissioning process. One of the things the Commission has done is ask the staff to undertake a rulemaking that would assure that we've got an effective and efficient process there. The way primarily we have gone through the process now often requires the utility or the licensee to ask for exemptions from our requirements. Although that has been effective from the standpoint that we maintain health and safety, it is a bit cumbersome sometimes, and it is also in terms of the perceptions and of the local community about what's going on, and or sometimes it doesn't necessarily, is maybe not as best communicated as it can. So that's the thing that we're looking at. And again, licensees, we've had a well-established process for them in terms of what they need to address from a safety standpoint, a security standpoint, and to work into those requirements. So as I say, we're working through the process now, and we hope to get a rule in a few years that would make it a little more effective and coherent.
Thank you, and thanks a lot, Chairman.
Thank you. You're the first one that made the mistake of the NRCC, because I thought about that all the time. I usually say the NRCC. Instead, it's the NRC, which is the National Republican Committee, which
or natural.
We get them confused all the time. Let me delve into a little bit about the operations of the NRC itself. As you noted, the Commission has received the Project AIM report and is in the process of reviewing recommendations. Although you are still reviewing the report, were you able to incorporate any of the Project AIM recommendations into the fiscal year 2016 budget request? The report recommends that the NRC brilliantly recommends that it have the right number of people with the right skills at the right time. Easier said than done sometimes. The Commission must be staffed at a level that can respond to the needs of the nuclear industry, but licensing fees should not make it harder for nuclear energy companies to compete. I think most of you mentioned at one point in time during your testimony today about right-sizing the agency. What exactly do you mean by right-sizing the agency? Where is it unright-sized now, and what needs to be done to address that, if you will?
Yes. Well, the particulars of the AIM report weren't into the fiscal 2016 budget. You know, given the timing, it came out. The report came out about the time I think the budget was released or submitted to the Congress. But the idea, I think, in the Commission in developing the 2016 budget was focused on: are we concentrating our resources on the work that needs to be done, and that's both our importance of our safety oversight mission and safety and security oversight mission, but also in terms of the licensing work that is put on our plate. So what overall it reflects a reduction in terms of the overall resources that are available in 2015 to 2016. So it's looking at those areas in where there's not as much a need for resources. Some of that area will be in the new reactor area, because the number, as I noted in my opening statement, the number of applications is not what it was expected to be, say, 6 or 7 years ago. So let me stop there, and if there's something else I didn't answer in your set of questions, I'd be happy.
Are there others that would like to comment on right-sizing the agency and what exactly that means, Kristine?
One of the things that the Commission is deliberating now, both in terms of embarking upon it and what form it might take, is what's called a rebaselining. In our prior careers, many of us know if there's a major government acquisition or long multi-year construction project, at some points departments and agencies will rebaseline that project. It's to make sure that you have fundamental adherence to what you were trying to accomplish. You don't have a lot of mission creep, a lot of bells and whistles. And so rebaselining for NRC, if we pursue it, may take a form of looking at work in-house, work projections, truing that up to the world as we understand it now, and then deciding what skill sets and people you would need to have, and then creating the organizational agility to move those people to that work, perhaps with a better performance than we've done to date. We've seen some of the vectors in the external economy emerging for a number of years now, and we still find that we've got bureaucratic obstacles to moving people to work that's needed, and I think to a person we all feel like that shouldn't be. So we're going to look organizationally at having a better understanding. I know it sounds so straightforward, and to me right-sizing means we probably think maybe we're a little larger than we need to be real honest with you. If we thought we were undersized, we wouldn't have asked for a budget flat or declining. So by virtue of mathematics, I think you define right-sizing to mean we need to perhaps attrit down in some areas. We may have other skill sets that are critical and in shortage. But my understanding is NRC is not rebaselined fundamentally in, I think, 15 years. And I think an agency, in my personal opinion, can benefit from going back to just looking at the fundamentals every now and then and seeing if you're in alignment with the world as it exists. So that's, although, again, we're still deliberating the set of recommendations.
Well, I would agree with that. I would note that over the years, I've been very supportive of the increased staffing that was necessary at the NRC, or that we thought was going to be necessary. For example, for SMRs. We wanted to make sure that there was not delays in doing the license applications and stuff that we thought would be coming along because of insufficient staff, and so we've plussed up the staff in order to make sure that that they were available. And then we don't have the license applications that we originally thought maybe 3 or 4 years ago that might come at this time. They might be there in the future, and we might need those personnel at the time. But it's a constantly changing environment, and the nuclear renaissance that we thought was going to be bigger than it currently is. We thought we'd maybe have several more reactors that we would be licensing around the country than we currently do. So rebaselining, right-sizing, whatever you want to call it, I think is an appropriate thing to do. How do you determine what your fees are going to be that you're going to charge the industry? 90% of your budget comes from fees charged to industry, right?
Correct.
How do you determine what that's going to be?
Well, ultimately, it's based on the final appropriation that we receive, and then it's also, I believe, in consultation in industry in terms of both the estimate of the types of applications come in, because you may recall that there are 2 types of fees. There's a in effect a fee for service. For example, an applicant comes in, wants a license amendment or a new license. And there's a fee paid there, and then there is in effect an annual fee that's imposed on operating power reactors.
How much of that 90% is from fees that are charged because someone wants an application or an amendment or something like that, and how much of it in the base out there that's charged to everybody?
My CFO is telling me it's apparently about 1/3 is related to applications. The applications. This is the Part 1, right. Part 170, so-called Part 170 fees. So that would mean about 2/3 are derived from the annual fee.
A key outcome of Project AIM recommendations is the development of an overhead structure that is well-defined, reasonable, and acceptable to external stakeholders. How have or will you involve stakeholders in the transformation of your budget process?
What we've done is we have, through the AIM process, we've engaged stakeholders on that. I think we will continue to do that as we implement. I forecast it, say, as Commissioner Svinicki says, we haven't completed deliberations, but I think it may be safe to say that to the extent where these things have impact on the stakeholders, I think it's important to engage them as we go forward, so that we understand what the concerns are, and then in reaching some solution, that we have something that's workable and effective.
In your testimony, you mentioned that the Commission has recently received a benchmarking report looking at how the NRC fee practices compare with those of other regulatory agencies. What has the NRC learned from this report, and how does the NRC fee practices compare, and how has this information been incorporated in the FY15 rule fee?
I think we're in the process of still getting the report, but yeah, we've just received the draft report, and our CFO will be taking a look at it. I would imagine, to the extent it's relevant to because again, the rule that was published yesterday was a proposed rule. I think to the extent that it helps, from my standpoint, to the extent it helps us understand where we ought to be with the final rule, that we'll take that into consideration.
I look forward to looking at seeing how these changes are being implemented and how the Commission's working to do that. I'm a little concerned in the effort to streamline the rulemaking process. The NRC staff now spends significant resources on new rulemaking efforts. We talked about this yesterday, prior to obtaining Commission approval. How is the need for a new rule determined? Is that a staff-driven decision, or is that a Commission-driven decision?
Well, for the most part, they're commission-driven decisions. As staff, obviously, we rely on our staff from looking at things like operating experience, industry requests, or the like, to identify areas where there might be a need for a new rule or modification of existing rules. But for most rulemaking actions, it requires a Commission approval. Our executive director for operations.
At what stage does it require Commission approval?
For the most part, it would require approval at the proposed stage.
If I may bring to the subcommittee's attention something that I recently discovered. It occurred in 2006. I joined our commission in 2008. Once again, forecasting a strong nuclear renaissance in the United States, in 2006, the Commission undertook to delegate to the agency staff a significant set of what I call front-end Commission approval and involvement steps in looking at what rulemakings would be embarked upon. And again, I respect that Commission in 2006 thought that they were going to be facing a crushing agency workload related to having 28 new reactors under construction and the various things that were forecast in that time period. And they didn't think it was sustainable for the Commission to be so involved in the early approval steps for new rulemaking activities before they were embarked upon. These were steps such as requiring the staff submittal to the Commission of a rulemaking plan, requiring the submittal of early regulatory analyses, and again, these are precursors well in advance of a proposed rule stage. The Commission delegated many of those activities to office directors and waived wholesale other requirements such as, although the sound of this committee is a bit strange, we have a committee to review generic requirements, and it's a body made up of senior staff that looks across programs and in some ways is looking at the cumulative impact of agency rulemaking activities. The requirement for review by that committee was waived and was left entirely discretionary to agency staff. So I think that some of these steps, while I'm sure well-intentioned and probably well-merited given what they predicted in 2006, were key front-end involvement of the Commission, which in my view has a unique opportunity to look across programs in the agency that office directors simply do not have that perspective. And so as we look at having X number of rulemakings, either active or inactive, ongoing, people throw around this number of 60 rulemakings, I challenge myself as to whether that change in the Commission's involvement in 2006 perhaps had some impact to where we are today. And I have not engaged my colleagues on this research I just discovered in the last couple of weeks. I wasn't aware that this significant change had been made at that time. But I think, again, it's nearly 10 years later. Is it worth, as a Commission, maybe looking at that possibly? And I hope to engage my colleagues on that.
Mr. Ostendorff?
I would, to add to Commissioner Svinicki's comments, say that In our current deliberations by the Commission on Project AIM, this is one specific aspect that I believe will be discussed and vetted, and I can't predict the outcome in the context of the rebaselining of work effort mentioned by others.
Well, I'm just curious, and I'm trying to get this in my head. If the staff is out there working in a particular area and they decide, geez, this is something that we need to actually write a rule on, how far do they go before the commission has to say, yeah, that's an area we need a rule written on? Do they go out? How much work and money is expended on looking at proposed rules before the commission gets involved and says, yeah, proceed with that, or no, we don't need that? Where do you step in? When? At what point?
Well, again,
As you can tell, I'm a little bit concerned about staff-driven rules rather than commission-driven rules.
Certainly. No, I understand that, and as Commissioner Svinicki said or indicated, I wasn't particularly aware of some of the information in terms of this. But again, as Commissioner Ostendorff said, I think this is something ripe for us to look at. The commission can always step in. I mean, the staff, we have the responsibility, we have the ability to obtain, each commissioner individually can obtain the information they want to carry out as they see fit their responsibilities. We as a collegial body can reverse the direction on a particular thing, and I think the importance for us is even if we have a circumstance now where there may be some rulemaking activity that may be going on that doesn't formally come for the approval, we actually have the ability to do that and maintain awareness of what's on. We do get reports from our staff on various activities, so I think the responsibility, rests with us in terms of maintaining that oversight and awareness of what's going on.
Well, I'll tell you what drives part of my concern, I guess. When we, on the one hand, talk about right-sizing the agency, which we talk about right-sizing the agency, and on the other hand, we talk about rules being driven. I've been around long enough, both at state and federal level, to know that bureaucracies have a tendency to when hands are idle, we think of things to do, and that concerns me to some degree, and I'm just wondering how much of this thinking of things to do drives some of the rules, if at all. I don't know. But I have heard concerns about the number of rules and so forth, and I'm trying to drive at where's the commission's responsibility versus how far can these go before the commission actually gets involved. I know you can get involved at any stage along the way, but do you? And that's why I asked these set of questions. So it's an issue that we'll continue to look at. Marcy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Burns, on the issue of the continued storage of spent nuclear fuel, the NRC determined that spent fuel could be safely stored on site well past a reactor's lifespan. I understand that there is a legal challenge to the NRC's waste confidence rule. Could you give us an update on the status of that challenge, please?
Certainly. The continued storage rule is really a continuation, if you will, of the Commission's previous waste confidence rule. The waste confidence rule, of course, dated from the early 1980s. The challenge is the petitioners who were challenging the agency's final rule, now called continued storage, have filed for a petition for review in the Court of Appeals, I believe here in the District of Columbia Circuit. And my understanding is that the briefing, the expectation is the briefing will be done before the court toward the latter part of this year. The General Counsel is confirming my impression.
What do you expect the challenger's argument will be in court?
I haven't read the petitions for review, which are normally often very general or very cursory at this stage of the proceeding. Again, I think they will question the commission's conclusions with respect to the outcome of the rule itself. I think the commission's action was completed before I came onto the commission in November. But having been involved in this rule as general counsel before, and my experience with it, I think the staff has done a good job in terms of considering the various comments on the rule and establishing a firm basis for it. So we'll put ourselves in front of the court as the process allows it to be.
Should the court side with the challengers, what would be the impact to the rule and by extension to the operating plans?
I wouldn't want to speculate too much because, again, it depends on what the court says. There are circumstances which the court may say you need to correct and affect there might be some procedural issue you need to correct, but the court might say we're not going to stay the agency's actions in other cases, and it could be the opposite. So I wouldn't want to speculate too much on that. Again, if the court thinks we need to do something else, again, I think we're confident that we've done a good job already, but if there's something we'll do, we'll address what the court tells us to do.
Thank you. I'm very impressed with this panel, Mr. Chairman. I think it's energized, it's informed, and I'm really glad that you invited this number of people up. They seem quite awake and attuned to the challenges ahead. I just wanted to go back to an experience that I've had and share it with you because you might be in a position to do something about it. Commissioner Ostendorff, you having come from the military will maybe identify with what I'm saying here. I view working in these plants as not just another job. And what has surprised me over the years in our region where we've had very serious challenges, those that actually helped both the company and the public were never properly acknowledged. In the military, when you do something really exceptional, you get a battle ribbon. When you're part of a corps that has a brotherhood and sisterhood, your commander even has a special medal that's struck that he hands to special people that he meets along the way. And I have been actually surprised and disappointed that we haven't done more to recognize these exceptional Americans. I don't think they even got a letter from the government of the United States for preventing hazard in our region. So I'm just asking you, and I don't know who could actually do it, but you have how many staff that work at the NRC?
About 3,700.
3,700 people. There must be somebody there somewhere that cares about people who work in these plants, either directly or on contract, and could help us figure out when they do something great, like they run into a plant that is at a critical moment and at risk to their own lives, they have done things that have stopped damage. My gosh, they should have a big medal, and they get nothing. So I'm just saying to you, if somebody could look at the workforce issue, I've invited Commissioner Svinicki out to our area, and you're all welcome. I want you to meet some of these people. And maybe as you go through these plants, you know, by happenstance, you bump into them. But they are remarkable. I couldn't do what they do. I don't have the muscular strength to do some of what they do and the training they go through. I just think that there should be something initiated that acknowledges their importance and recognizes it when they do something great. And I don't think we do that as a country at the NRC. And I don't know why we don't. If you don't have legislative authority to do it, let me know. But I think it could be done under the existing authorities that you have. So all I'm asking you to do is to think hard about where something remarkable has been done, to figure out a system of acknowledgement. I'm not asking for any money. Maybe you'd have to pay for a little patch they could sew on their uniform. For those that are contracted employees who regularly go into some of these plants, they work so humbly, and they just don't get any recognition, and of a national nature, and I think they deserve it. So they're not military. They receive their own apprenticeship and journeyman's cards in the community that I represent, and I really respect them, and I think our federal government should too. Do you have a means to think about this within the NRC? Do you need a formal letter from me to ask you to think about how to identify some of these folks? Yes,
Congressman,
Commissioner
I appreciate it.
Ostendorff.
I think we all four commissioners here agree with the sentiment and the spirit behind your remarks and your question. Let us provide some feedback to you on this area if we may. I think that there's some industry representatives even in this hearing today. I do believe from our experience collectively, when we go to nuclear power plants, we will see some indication that various licensees are providing some recognition of their employees, but I'd like to have the opportunity to give you a more fulsome response. And in addition to what else we might be able to do.
Yeah, I really think some of these folks that helped us 25 years ago or more, they're still alive. The incident that occurred in 2003, I think it was, some of the workers who were contract workers ended up staying in motels where, as they moved from plant to plant, where nuclear particles were on their work clothes. I'm going, is this really happening? So I just think there's something missing in the way we treat the people. I don't want, the worst example I have of how people have been treated in nuclear power plants is the example of under the former Soviet Union when Chernobyl occurred and workers were sent in with no protective, they were sent in to their deaths, right? We don't have that situation here in this country. We have more respect for those who have these skills, but I just think that we need to regularize recognition. I don't know how one does that working with the private sector, because these are private plants. But I think when workers who are contracted workers go into a facility that is having difficulty, their national government should care about them and should acknowledge that service to our country. And with the private sector, we need to figure out how to do that. And if you could tell me who to work with within the NRC, I will be your strongest advocate because they deserve a recognition that they never get. So thank you for allowing me to put that on the record. I wanted to ask on securing radiological material, the omnibus included direction that the NRC provide a report to the committees that evaluate the effectiveness of the requirements of 10 CFR Part 37 and determines whether such requirements are adequate to protect high-risk radiological material. Has the NRC initiated this review, and can you speak to what you have found, if you have, or how you are implementing the requirements for radiological source licenses?
Congresswoman, the requirement is basically to do a review after after 2 years, and we'll be prepared to do that. I'm sure that we'll take some steps before we reach the 2-year mark to get there. Part of the background on the requirement was to allow a period of time for implementation of this Part 37 that addresses source security. Because it's a fairly new rule, and so we'll do that. We're very conscientious about the requirement to do the review, and we'll do so. One of the things that the agency, part of the background of this too is a requirement that goes back to the Energy Policy Act of 2005 related to source security. And there's a periodic task force that the NRC and other sister agencies who have an interest in it participate in. And there was a report last year which concluded that there were essentially no gaps in domestic source security. But again, I think it's important for us to follow through on the language, because we have a new rule. You want to understand from the experience with your implementation, is it doing what you think what you tried to design it to do, and So we'll take that on in terms of doing the report within the next 2 years that was requested.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, in closing, this will be my last comment. Your leadership, Chairman Burns, is so important, and every one of the commissioners. I've been impressed with every one of you this morning, and I've had to deal with the NRC now for over 3 decades. Without leadership being set at the top for a well-managed organization, things happen downstream that are very dangerous. And so I just encourage you on to set the kind of leadership to revive the NRC and its multiple connections around the country to managing this very important assets that exist within the United States of America. And I wish you well in your duties, and to enliven your board, to keep your board engaged, and make sure that the Commission does what it's chartered to do. And thank you very much for your testimony this morning.
Thank you.
Mr. Fortenberry?
What is the future of the nuclear industry?
Well, as the regular, I'm not sure that I'm really the one to speak to that.
But you can look at the trajectory of the current dynamics, both here and internationally, and give me since you're immersed in this world,
yeah,
it would be helpful to have your perspective
and
on that.
I'll perhaps take from my prior experience at OECD.
I just looked at you. Anybody else can answer it
Yeah.
if they want. But.
Well, what you see primarily, you see a very dynamic and concentrated building program in China, and other interest in emerging, what we would call emerging countries, or not emerging countries, but nascent nuclear countries such as Vietnam. India, now that it is mostly, if not back into the fold, has a vigorous program. So that's what you're seeing, and then the Gulf states as well. So that's what sort of you're seeing internationally. It's a cloudier picture in Europe, although you have in the United Kingdom and in Eastern Europe a lot of interest in new nuclear development. In the U.S., you have again a dynamic that between things like cheap natural gas, questions in terms of how the energy market is regulated or unregulated, and things like that have the current, which has led to the current, I think, lower interest in pursuing some of the applications we thought we might have a few years ago. That said, we recently had a hearing on the Detroit Edison, or their rename, on the Fermi 3 plant in Michigan, and there's also Dominion, its potential for North Anna 3. Both of those utilities have indicated to us their interest in pursuing the combined licenses, partly as a part of their future planning portfolio. They may defer a decision whether they will actually construct until the early 2020s, again looking at energy markets, issues about carbon pricing and things like that, all of which are fairly much outside the NRC's regulatory regime.
But in the race for commercial markets, who is leading that? You said it's very dynamic.
Well, what I said is in China, you have an extraordinary, vigorous construction program. You have had U.S. technology in terms of Westinghouse. They're building the AP1000, but the Chinese have also looked at interest in others, such as Areva Designs, and have built them, Areva, the French company. Again, you have U.S.-based marketing from the U.S.-based industry, as well as other players in the market. The Russians are very vigorous in terms of their marketing strategies for their newer designs.
So if we've got no harmonization of design standards, do we have harmonization of security initiatives, not only in terms of actual commercial plant protection, but again, applying these lessons for the potential diversion of materials or accounting for materials?
Well, in terms of the designs themselves, I think that in terms of the material accounting and control, that's not so much in the reactor design. That's in terms of the fuel and the types of fuels that are used. And again, I would say, with respect to...
I don't want to impose on things that are outside your purview, but again, sitting from where I sit, trying to get, when you look across the spectrum of nuclear security issues, you operate within a certain set of parameters, ensuring that we have commercially licensed, safe use of radiological materials here. However, this has implications moving forward in a world of fast-moving technology and new resource players with large capacity, to make us all think critically as to how, again, back to your words, which I like, harmonization either of design, but certainly harmonization of commitments to material security as well as non-proliferation is the key question. And you might occupy a sort of narrower seat in that bandwidth, and I understand that, so I don't put you in an awkward position. But at the same time, in terms of all of us working strategically to ensure that your mission is met, these other questions loom very large as well, I would assume, for you.
Yeah. Oh, yes. They certainly do. And again, in terms of us looking at designs, obviously, in many instances, we're looking at the design in the United States. But as I said, we have responsibilities with respect to potential export of design and export of particular equipment. I think, as Commissioner Ostendorff said earlier, we work well within the interagency community in terms of those types of issues. And again, there are controls domestically. We have our safety, our security. We have and safeguards requirements. And again, to the extent that we are involved in terms of approval of exports and export of technology, that's part of our responsibility. And we also working with the interagency community, particularly the Department of Energy, Department of Commerce, in some of these other areas.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank you all for being here, Chairman Burns and members of the Commission. Normally, for the 12, 13 years, whatever it's been that I've been on this committee, whenever we've had the NRC testify, we've always had the chairman come up and give the budget request and stuff. And I think it was important to have all the commissioners come up and so that we had a chance to get to know you and talk to you. And I know that you don't all think the same thing. If you did, only one of you would be necessary. But it is good for us to get a chance to know you a little better and talk to you about the important work that the NRC does, because it is vitally important work, and it's very critical that the NRC maintain the credibility that it currently, I think, exists and has across the country, both for the public to know that we have safe nuclear operating plants in this country, and also for the regulated industry to know that you're working with them to make sure that we're not unduly driving the cost and making nuclear energy less competitive or anything like that. So I appreciate the challenge that you face. We look forward to working with you and hearing about how you're implementing some of the rebaselining or whatever you want to call it, and the rule-making processes that you're going through, and those types of things. So thank you all for being here today. Committee's adjourned.
Thank you.